Jason Statham walked casually through the busy Detroit factory, eyes scanning heavy machinery and bustling workers. As he turned toward a quieter corner, his steps slowed abruptly. A disturbing scene unfolded before him. Malik, an elderly black worker with gentle eyes and weathered hands, was desperately trying to stack heavy boxes. Around him stood three muscular, imposing men, wearing greasy coveralls, smirking viciously. Hank, the tallest, knocked boxes roughly from Malik's trembling grasp. "What's wrong, old man? Too slow again." Hank sneered, voice dripping with cruelty. The others laughed, hurling racial insults casually. "Maybe we get work done faster without your kind dragging us down," another jeered, openly mocking Malik's dignity and race. Malik silently picked up the scattered boxes, humiliation etched deep into his tired, patient face. Malik tried desperately to remain dignified, shoulders hunched, face lowered as he carefully gathered the scattered parts. Each mocking insult visibly wounded him, yet he maintained composure, clearly accustomed, but never immune, to such degradation. Quiet murmurs slipped from his lips. "Sorry, just trying my best," but were drowned out by louder laughter. Every cruel taunt chipped further at his dignity, the pain clearly reflected in his exhausted, heartbroken eyes. Workers nearby glanced nervously, some exchanging troubled looks but remaining silent. A younger worker pulled out a phone cautiously, hands trembling, secretly recording the incident. Yet no one intervened, fearful of Hank's intimidation and the bullies' positions of power. Most looked away, eyes downcast, guilty but too afraid to act, their inaction only emboldening the cruelty taking place right before their eyes. Standing unnoticed in shadows cast by towering machinery, Jason observed the cruelty unfold. His jaw tightened, fists slowly clenched at his sides. The casual brutality burned deeply in his narrowed eyes. Quietly, his breathing steadied, controlled fury building inside him like a storm waiting to be unleashed. When Hank violently shoved Malik down to the concrete floor, Jason stepped forward calmly from the darkness. His presence filled the factory space instantly. Eyes locked onto the startled bullies, voice icy cold, Jason spoke clearly, each word a razor. "You just made your last mistake." Before we proceed, like and subscribe to catch Jason Statham's epic face-off with racist factory bullies, and comment where you're watching from today. Detroit's afternoon haze hung over the industrial district as Jason Statham stepped through the massive sliding doors of Maddox Auto Systems, a gritty factory deep in the heart of Motor City. Inside, the air buzzed with energy, hydraulic presses pounded like war drums, welding sparks lit up dark corners, and forklifts zipped between yellow lines like sharks in a metal ocean. Every surface wore a layer of earned grime. Steel parts clanked into crates, pneumatic tools hissed from suspended cables, and the floor vibrated slightly with every blast furnace cycle. No flash, no filters. This was real work, the kind that built cities. Dozens of workers moved with rhythmic urgency, decked out in navy overalls, work gloves, and protective goggles. Some shouted over the din, others moved like ghosts between machines, faces blank, laser-focused. Above it all, a digital clock ticked silently. Shift change was still hours away. This was grind time. Jason moved through it like a ghost, unbothered, observant, and calm. Earlier that day, Jason had arrived with a casual purpose. His longtime friend, Mark Trent, owned the factory and had hinted at a possible collaboration, converting part of the facility into a custom machine-building wing for upcoming stunt sequences in Jason's next film project. After a short tour of the front offices and break room, Mark, friendly, balding, grease-smudged shirt, clapped Jason on the shoulder. "Walk around as much as you want. The floor's yours. You'll like what you see. Just don't sign any autographs. You'll jam production." Jason grinned. "Deal." He kept his hoodie up, cap low, blending in just enough. No security. No entourage. Just a walkthrough of America's industrial backbone. It was not the kind of place where fame mattered. Jason passed racks of half-assembled engine blocks, nodded silently at a few curious glances, and stopped once to admire the sheer scale of a custom V8 crankshaft in progress. But then something changed. A shift in the air. Somewhere down the left wing of the factory floor, beyond the loading dock, voices rose. Mocking. Laughter laced with menace. Jason's smile faded. Malik Johnson, age 58, had been at Maddox Auto for over 2 decades. A Vietnam veteran's son and a mechanic by trade, he was known for his soft-spoken loyalty, precise work, and never missing a shift. His hands were worn and cracked, shoulders permanently hunched from years under heavy machinery. He always wore his old army green beanie, a quiet nod to his late father. Malik never spoke unless spoken to, but when he did, it was with respect. He was one of the few workers who never raised his voice, never pushed back, and never asked for special treatment. And maybe that's why he was easy to target. He had been silently enduring small cruelties for years, tools misplaced, his lunch accidentally thrown away, his locker jammed shut repeatedly. Malik never reported it. He just worked. Today, he was restocking the parts rack near the western mezzanine. Alone. Tired. Focused. And that's when the dogs came out. Hank Coulson led the pack. A 6'4" warehouse veteran, Hank was a beast of a man with a crooked nose, tattooed knuckles, and a booming laugh that made other workers flinch. With 14 years of the factory, he knew how to play the line. Rough enough to scare, smart enough not to get caught. He walked with swagger. His boots stomped louder than anyone else's. He was the guy foreman didn't want to mess with today. Flanking him were 2 goons, Brent and Daryl. Both bulky, mid-30s, necks thick like tree trunks. They laughed when Hank laughed. Moved when Hank moved. Their favorite hobby? Picking on people who wouldn't fight back. Especially Malik. Today, their eyes locked on him early. And from the first dropped bolt, they were circling him like wolves. Jason passed by this group an hour earlier, heard a sharp laugh, saw the tension in Malik's posture. He paused, studied the interaction. His instincts prickled. He did not step in then. Not yet. But now, as that laugh rang out again, louder, crueler, and followed by the crash of a box hitting the floor, Jason stopped cold. His jaw clenched. He turned. And started walking straight toward it. The moment Jason turned the corner, the harassment was already in full swing. Hank stood over Malik like a predator sizing up prey, arms crossed, smirk sharp. Brent and Daryl flanked him, bouncing a wrench between their hands like a toy. Malik, kneeling to sort through an engine box, barely had time to breathe before the insults started. Still picking up scraps, Grandpa? Hank barked. What are you now, 90? Brent chuckled. Pretty sure his retirement checks just oil stains and expired coupons. Daryl added, slowest man in the building. Slower than a flat tire in January. Hank leaned down close, his voice like acid. You ever think maybe you're not built for real work, Malik? Maybe it's time you gave up your spot to someone who doesn't belong in a nursing home. Their laughter echoed, bouncing off the metal walls. Malik did not answer. He kept his head low and tried to focus on his work, but the sneering wouldn't stop. They mimicked his walk, dragged their feet dramatically across the concrete, panting with fake exhaustion. Oh Lawdy, Brent whined, holding his back. Ma bones, boss. Ma arthritis. Jason's steps slowed. He had seen bullying before. But this wasn't locker room teasing or dumb banter. This was hate cloaked in humor. Malik stayed composed. Barely. He stood slowly, brushing his palms on his pants, voice soft but clear. I'm just trying to do my job. Let's not do this today. Hank squinted. Your job? Your job's to stay out the way. Brent shoved one of Malik's boxes with his foot. Maybe you should work from home. You know, like from the street corner. That line stung. Malik's jaw twitched. But still, he didn't raise his voice. Please, he said again. I'm not bothering you. The other workers nearby heard it all, but none moved. One man on the forklift reversed and left entirely. 2 more walked past without a word, their eyes glued to the floor. A woman glanced up from the bolt rack, froze for a second, then went back to sorting like nothing was happening. This was normal here. This was tolerated. Jason clenched his fists behind his back, inching closer. Hank's tone darkened. Let's speed this up then. With a sudden shove, Hank pushed Malik in the chest. The older man stumbled backward, bumping into the metal shelving unit behind him. The jolt knocked over 2 crates of spark plugs, sending them crashing to the floor with a metallic avalanche. Tools scattered. Parts clattered. Malik hit the concrete hard, a loud grunt forced from his lungs. The laughter turned into howling. "You break like your parts, old man," Brent shouted. That was it. Jason took 1 step forward. Then another. He reached the group and stopped directly between Malik and the bullies. His voice didn't rise. It didn't need to. Back away from him. 3 heads turned at once. Brent blinked. "Who the hell are you?" Jason looked down at Malik, who was trying to sit up, face flushed with shame. Then Jason raised his eyes to Hank, locking in. "You're going to apologize. And then you're going to walk away." Hank scoffed. "Who do you think you are? Security?" "No," Jason replied calmly. "I'm the guy telling you that your time's up." Daryl stepped forward, sizing Jason up. "This ain't your movie set, stuntman. Keep walking." Hank stepped in front of Jason, chest puffed out, breath hot. "Or what?" Jason's jaw tightened, and the corner of his lip twitched just once. His next words were soft. Deadly soft. "Try me." Brent stepped forward first, his grin wide with arrogance. "Wait a second. No way. You're that guy, huh? Jason Statham? Mr. Action Hero." Daryl laughed. "Man, I thought you were taller in the movies." Hank added with a mock bow, "Welcome to Detroit's Hollywood. Hope you brought a stunt double." The group erupted into laughter, clearly unfazed. They circled Jason casually, like wolves pretending to be harmless. But the way their shoulders squared, the way Brent cracked his knuckles, it was not just talk. "Hey," Brent said, pointing at Malik. "You his new sidekick or something?" "What's this, Fast and the Feeble?" Jason stood still, unblinking. "Let me guess," Hank continued, voice rising for the growing audience. "You think this is one of those moments where you say something cool and we all back off?" He paused dramatically, cocking his head. "Well, we don't." Jason didn't flinch. "You will." Hank let out a sharp laugh. Big words for a man without a script. Then Brent stepped forward, quick, sudden, and shoved Jason hard in the chest. The crowd gasped. Jason stepped back half a foot but remained upright. His stance barely shifted. His hands stayed down. He looked down at Brent's hand. Then back up. Slowly. Brent's smile faded slightly. Jason didn't blink. Another second passed. Then 2. "You done?" Jason asked quietly. Brent took a step back. But Hank wasn't done. More workers had stopped nearby. Some peeked from behind the tool cages. A few were halfway up the stairs to the break room, recording quietly with their phones angled low. The factory noise kept roaring. Machines didn't stop for drama, but the human silence was deafening. One younger worker muttered to his buddy, "That's Jason Statham." "I swear to God." Another whispered, "Is this real?" People weren't helping, but they were watching now. Too many eyes. Too much tension. Something was coming, and they knew it. Jason never looked around. His gaze stayed fixed on Hank. Then Hank stepped up, face inches from Jason's, breath heavy with tobacco and arrogance. "You know what your problem is?" Hank growled. "You think this is a movie. But it ain't. This is real life, Hollywood." He pointed a finger directly at Jason's chest. Then tapped it. "Out here, the cameras don't save you." Jason's jaw tightened. Still no reaction. Not even a raised hand. "You gonna stand there all day looking pretty, or you gonna run back to your trailer?" More laughter. Then Hank's voice went loud. Too loud. "You're in my factory now. This is my floor. And I don't give a damn who you are." With that, he shoved Jason with both hands. Hard. A full-body shove meant to assert total dominance. Jason stumbled back 1 step. 1 single step. Then he looked up. Eyes locked. The shift happened. His hands rose. Not fast, not slow. Controlled. Deliberate. And the fire in his eyes flickered to life. The crowd didn't blink. A wave of tension crashed through the factory like electricity through steel. Jason tilted his head slightly. "Wrong factory," he said. And then, like a coil snapping free, everything changed. Hank roared like a charging bull and lunged at Jason, fists clenched, fury burning behind his eyes. He came in fast, too fast, but Jason was already moving. With clinical precision, Jason sidestepped the brute's full-force rush, barely shifting his weight as Hank's momentum carried him forward. Then, snap. Jason's hand latched onto Hank's wrist mid-swing. One fluid twist, one sharp pivot of the shoulder, and a sickening pop echoed across the factory floor. Hank's body folded in midair as Jason torqued the arm behind his back and spun, using Hank's own size against him. In one brutal motion, Jason slammed him face-first into the nearest metal workstation. Crash. The steel table groaned under the impact. Tools scattered, a dent caved in the side panel, and Hank let out a ragged grunt of pain as his jaw cracked against cold iron. The factory froze. Phones dropped. Someone let out a stunned gasp. Jason didn't gloat, didn't speak. He simply stepped back, squared his shoulders, and turned to face the others, expression like stone. Brent's face paled. Daryl's jaw twitched. For the first time, the bullies looked uncertain. And Hank? He slumped off the workstation with blood on his lip and confusion in his eyes, like he just got hit by a freight train wearing boots. The room had shifted. The crowd sensed it. Jason Statham wasn't playing a role. He was the role. Brent and Daryl did not hesitate, not because they were brave, but because they were embarrassed. Their leader just got folded like a lawn chair in front of half the factory. They came in fast, hoping numbers would overwhelm him. Brent lunged from the right, swinging a heavy wrench like a club. Daryl charged straight on, lowering his shoulder like a linebacker. It should have been chaos. To Jason, it was geometry. He sidestepped Brent's arc, the wrench whooshing past his face. In the same breath, Jason grabbed a nearby coil of rubber tubing hanging from the equipment rack, looped it mid-motion, and snapped it tight around Brent's forearm. A quick yank, Brent crashed headfirst into the corner of a crate stack. Out cold before he hit the floor. Daryl was next. His full-body charge met steel when Jason pivoted and redirected him straight into a rolling tool chest. It hit Daryl square in the ribs. He doubled over. Jason grabbed the chest's lid, slammed it shut, bang, then followed with a clean knee to the gut. Daryl collapsed sideways, gasping. Jason stepped back again, scanning for more threats. None came. Factory noise kept grinding, but around them? Silence. No showboating. No posing. Just brutal, efficient dismantling. One by one. Daryl tried to rise again, groaning, one hand pressed to his ribs. He barely made it halfway before Jason stepped forward, grabbed his collar, and drove a clean, snapping elbow directly into his sternum. The air fled Daryl's lungs with a pitiful wheeze as he crumpled, body twitching on the floor like a broken puppet. Brent, still semi-conscious, stumbled back to his feet, dazed and bloodied, swinging wide with no aim. Jason didn't flinch. He blocked the punch mid-air, twisted Brent's arm inward with terrifying precision, and then, with a controlled jerk, snapped his elbow sideways. A wet, horrible pop echoed through the building. Brent's scream tore through the silence as he dropped to his knees, clutching the limp, hanging arm. The third man, one of Hank's backup buddies who had stayed out of the fray, made a last-ditch effort. He grabbed a crowbar from the floor and rushed blindly. Bad choice. Jason ducked under the swing, stepped inside, and planted a vicious palm strike to the man's nose. Straight up. Cartilage shattered, and the man dropped like a stone without another sound. Jason stood now, surrounded by bodies, bent, bleeding, gasping. Not one hit had been wasted. No flashy moves. No wasted energy. He had ended the fight with surgical precision, the kind honed from years of stunts, combat training, and something deeper, discipline. Ruthless control. Around him, no one cheered. No one moved. They all just stared, shocked at what they had witnessed, and more so by how easily it had happened. A groan echoed from behind the scattered crates. Hank. Somehow, he was getting up again. Blood smeared his brow, his lip was split, and his breathing came in ragged huffs, but his eyes were wild, filled with pure, boiling rage. Pride had taken a beating, but ego was still driving him. He grabbed a loose steel pipe from the floor and staggered upright, snarling. "I'm not done," he growled, staggering forward like a wounded animal. "You're not better than me." Jason turned calmly to face him, eyes narrowed. Not in anger, but focus. Hank charged with everything he had left, swinging the pipe like a bat, screaming, "This is my floor!" Jason ducked under the wild swing, spun once, and with perfect timing launched a brutal spinning elbow into Hank's temple. Crack! The sound echoed like thunder. Time froze for half a second. Then Hank's body slumped instantly, pipe clattering to the floor, legs folding under him like dead weight. He collapsed flat, face down on the concrete, arms splayed. Unmoving. The entire factory was dead silent. No one moved. No one spoke. It was over. Jason stood tall, chest rising slowly with controlled breath. Around him, the bullies were reduced to groans and wreckage. He did not celebrate. He simply looked down at Hank's unconscious form, shook his head once in disgust, then stepped back, leaving the broken tyrant exactly where he fell. And the factory? They had just witnessed a legend. For a long, tense moment, no one moved. The factory, once alive with industrial noise and background chatter, was now frozen in stunned silence. Tools stopped clinking. Forklifts idled mid-motion. Even the air seemed to hold still. Jason slowly straightened his shirt, exhaling calmly as if he had just finished a jog, not dismantled an entire squad of bullies. Without a word, he turned and walked to Malik, who was still sitting on the ground, shaken but conscious. Jason reached out a hand, steady, respectful, and helped him to his feet with a kind of quiet dignity that spoke louder than any speech. Malik nodded, eyes glossy with something between gratitude and disbelief. Just then, the clack of expensive shoes echoed from the upper catwalk. Mark, the factory owner, stormed down the stairs, his expression morphing from confusion to embarrassment as he took in the scene. His lead foreman unconscious, other senior workers groaning on the floor, and Jason Statham calmly standing amid it all. "Jason, what the hell happened here?" Jason didn't raise his voice. He spoke clearly, firmly. "You had a problem on your floor. I just cleaned it up." Mark looked around and saw the truth in every watching face. He turned to Hank's crumpled body, then to Malik, still holding his bruised side, and swallowed hard. He didn't hesitate. "You're fired," he barked at Hank and his goons. "All of you. You're done here." He turned to Malik next. "I'm sorry," he said with genuine shame. "This should have never been allowed. That ends today." Applause rose, not thunderous, but meaningful. Workers began nodding. Someone muttered, "Finally." Phones were already uploading the footage online. Raw, unedited, undeniable. One clip had already hit social media under the title, "Jason Statham Wrecks Racist Bullies in Detroit Factory." It was spreading fast. Malik looked around, clearly overwhelmed by the shift. Then he turned to Jason. "Thank you," he said quietly. Not many would have stepped in. Jason gave him a single nod. More should have. With that, he walked toward the exit, his steps unhurried. At the loading dock, he paused, turned back, gave Malik a firm handshake, full of weight, full of meaning. Then, without another word, he disappeared into the sunlight pouring through the factory bay door. No cameras. No interviews. Just action. And everyone watching would remember exactly what they saw. A man who stood up because it was right. True strength is never about humiliation. It is not in fists thrown at the helpless or voices raised to drown out silence. Real toughness shows itself when you stand between cruelty and the ones who bear it every day without complaint. In that factory, Jason Statham did not throw punches for ego. He did it because someone had to. Because Malik, like too many others, had endured in silence while the world looked the other way. Jason did not need a crowd to cheer or a camera to frame his heroism. He saw injustice, stepped forward, and did what most people only dream of doing. He ended it. With every move, he reminded us all, dignity is not a luxury, it is a right. And when it is stripped away by those with power, someone with conviction must stand in the gap. He did not ask for praise. He gave Malik something more powerful, his dignity back. And to every worker watching that day, Jason proved the truth. A real hero does not act for credit. He acts because silence is no longer an option. Respect is not earned by shouting the loudest or swinging the hardest. It's earned in the moment when you stand, alone if needed, against the ones who abuse their power. It's measured by what you do when no one else will. And when Jason stood up that day, the world took notice.